Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Coach's Corner. Are we live? I got a dog in the background. Welcome to the Coach's Corner. Today we're talking about, what do we call this show? How to find a night that's right for you. Hi, Sadb. Hello. How to find a night that's right for you. And I was warned to tell people that this is not a dating service. This is about someone who might be interested in becoming a squire, and in the process of becoming a squire, you're going to look around for a knight that maybe you want to have that relationship with. So let's do some quick introductions. So I always point the wrong way. Up here we have.
Hi, I'm Sir Sadb.
There's Sir Sadb, and then below Sir Sadb, Duke Sean, who's muted.
Of course I'm muted. Hi, I'm Duke Sean. I've been on before. You may have seen me recently. It's been a while.
Yes.
It's been a while.
So I wanted to and it's actually funny. One of my friends reached out to me and he said, he was like, "Oh, this sounds like an interesting idea for a show." He was like, "Do you have any squires?" And I said, "No." He was like, "Well, then who are you to give advice on this topic?" So that's one of the reasons why we have Duke Sean on here, because I think Duke Sean has had squires. I don't think, Sadb and I are two. I think Sadb is about 6 months into being a knight.
Yeah, I was very recently a squire myself, so I feel qualified.
Well, exactly, and I'm 27 months into being a knight. So so it's not been too long ago since we've been squires. We have kind of like a whole different perspective here. So, and I'd asked Sean about his background, how long ago he was a squire, and he said it's changed since then, but he's seen it all. So to begin with, I wanted to talk about a little bit about why do we even have this system, or maybe some of the benefits of this system, and then each of us will sort of give their different take on it. But one of the things I've always thought about, so one of the things we do is that we, as knights, we typically take responsibility in helping to run the local practices. Not every knight does. Some knights focus on different things, but it's one of the things that we try to do. And a lot of times we talk about how do we run practices more effectively. And one of the struggles that we have is because the rattan community is not nearly as big as, say, the karate community. There's karate schools all over the place. You don't have to drive more than 10 minutes and you find a strip mall with a karate school in it. And it's not too hard to find a karate school. You pay them some money. They've got paid instructors. They've got a lot of people participating. They can find a class that's right for you. We don't necessarily have that luxury. So we do the best we can to set our practices up to sort of hit maybe what's the middle of what people are going to try to do. And one of the benefits of squiring to a knight is that if you want something more than that, you can have a personal relationship with a mentor / teacher that can then find out what it is that you want to do and to see if they can help sort of take you on a journey a little bit further. So I want to pass that off to Sadb to see if you have something to add to that, or maybe a different take on it.
No, I actually, full honesty, my internet cut out, so I didn't even hear half of it.
I get that a lot.
I was hoping you were calling Sean first so I could catch
it. So this is I'm glad we're talking about this. This is a complex topic. As we were kind of looking at some of this stuff, before the show about what we talked about, I just realized how very deep this is and how much there is to this. So super excited to be talking about this. And I know that we're not going to be able to cover everything. So for me, one of the big things about the knight squire relationship is, being a squire, is one of the very few tangible links that we have to the Middle Ages. That knight squire relationship is one of the very few things that we know existed in period. And I think it's one of the things that we are doing most accurately. There's a lot of stuff that we do in the SCA that is not quite how it all went down in period. But I think the knight squire relationship is very close to how it was done in period. And again, it's one of the tangible links that we have. And I think it functions, pretty well for us as it did in period as well. One thing I will say about the taking of squires and the process. As Barry kind of alluded to, it's like we as knights, like part of our job is to teach fighting, right? Propagating our species. That's in Capora. That's the job, right? And especially you go to practice and you'll teach whoever's there and whoever wants to be taught. And I'll teach anybody how to throw a stick. I'll teach anybody how to fight. But being a knight or being my squire is a very different thing. It's a very personal relationship. It's an intimate relationship. And when you're selecting, who you want to be a knight, I mean, like you said, I know I expect all of my squires to learn from anybody anyway. So I'm not going to be the one and only instructor that they have in their fighting. So they're going to be getting that from everywhere else anyway. But when you say that I want to be squire to this person, what you're saying is that like you are the kind of knight that I want to be, and emulating that, and that's a very different thing than just fighting. I think the fighting aspect of it again from we can look at that from just a martial arts perspective of I'm trying to give you skills, but being a squire, it's like this is where I'm imparting to you what I think knighthood is. And you've said that you want to be the kind of knight that I am, and I'm trying to help you with that, and that goes way beyond just the fighting.
Squiring is saying, I like you, and I like your ideas, and I would like to subscribe to your newsletter. So yeah, I can in fact jump in here, piggybacking perfectly off of that. I'm going to do a lot of speaking from my own experience because I was, as we said, very recently a squire, and I spent many years at practice looking around and going, I'm very fortunate. I have some of the best fighters in the game at my local fight practice already teaching me all of the things, like why would I even need or want to be a squire? And then it became sort of I would like to have my own personal tour guide for those final stages, like getting me all the way there, having a sort of, set curriculum, as it were, instead of just randomly whatever we happen to be working on with everybody at fight practice today. And then also, again, those more sort of personal, deeper discussions about knighthood and what it means and how to do the thing from someone whose version of knighthood I liked and wanted to subscribe to their newsletter. So I would agree wholeheartedly. Like that's a big reason to do it, even if you're already getting the training. It is that sort of next level, and at least for me, gets into that sort of like deeper woo-woo side of knighthood that we often shy away from talking about, because much like Bess, I'm not real big into woo-woo, but like this is where I get it, is in that whole what does it mean to be a knight side.
Doesn't Bess pray before battles with like her sword on the shield or field or something? We talked about that last time. That sounds pretty woo-woo to me.
I don't know. I missed that apparently.
Hey, I wanted to ask.
Hey Barry,
go ahead.
I just posted a link in the comments to the Parable of Miles and the Knight, which, as I understand it, was written by Duke Dag. It's a really good story. That it's a pretty good encapsulation of an hour and a half conversation that we're about to have. But I definitely recommend that reading. And it just really hits. It just really hits. So,
well, I've never read that, so I will definitely read that when the show's over.
Oh, it's a must.
Real good.
I appreciate it. Well, we got Sean on the screen right now. If you could, why don't I thought it'd be really nice for the audience to just hear like 3 personal journeys. Like as you were looking to become a squire to someone, what was that like? What were you thinking? What was it you were looking for? And I guess we'll go to Sean for that one. And then maybe how's that changed now, or how relevant is it now?
Well, I mean, part of my journey involved the fact that I became a squire before I ever set foot on the fighting field. And that's just not something that happens anymore. I came to the society very young. And early on, I ran into a guy who, a gentleman of some obscure reference, one Brian Tarragon. And when I met Brian, he was Lord Brian Tarragon. He was a squire himself. He was, he wasn't knighted yet, and he just made that offer that he said, if you want to do this, I'm happy to help you do this. And so for me, it was, this was the guy that offered to help me out. And I know for me, I was Brian's first squire. There was never, I had no indication that, he was still unbelted. So I had no idea that Brian would go on to be one of the best fighters in the history of our sport. And early on, it was just, he was teaching me how to fight, but very quickly, I had realized that again, there was more to it than just the swing and the stick. And I think in a lot of ways, I kind of got lucky. I had been a page to another knight prior to that. And then, I just started working with Brian. I'm like, this seems like a guy I want to squire to. And so, I didn't have a list of reasons why I picked that guy. It's just, but we started working together early on, and it was just a good fit from the beginning. And, I just feel incredibly blessed to have had him as my squire. And like Cy was talking about earlier, the relationship part of this, that, Brian was more than somebody teaching me how to fight. I was a teenager. I was at a time where, I was an at-risk youth. And Brian kind of became that father figure that I needed at the right moment. And, so there was really so much more of it than just, the SCA side of it. And yeah, it was very much a relationship. And, like I said, I don't have a, laundry list of why I picked him. Just kind of got lucky in that regard. And I know later on, as I started taking squires myself, I had the first couple of squires that I had, they were nice guys who liked fighting, but they didn't love it. And so as far as, criteria goes and what I look for in my squires, after the first couple of guys that I had, that I'd realized early on that the one thing I cannot teach somebody is passion. I cannot teach you to love our sport. And if you do love our sport, you love what we do, then there's nothing I can't teach you after that. And so my primary criteria after that became, you just have to love what we do, because if you love it, you're going to be all in, and you're going to do the nightly things that I ask you to do outside of the fighting. And since I've added that as my primary criteria, I've had an embarrassingly high success rate. I've had 7 of my former squires knighted. And it was partially because I just wanted to make sure they love what we do. So that's a little bit about my path. And, kind of both, me coming into being a squire, and then, the beginnings of me taking squires thereafter.
Hey, can you answer a quick question here? Because you brought up before, so a couple of things to just clarify for the audience. So you mentioned you were squired. I thought you said you were squired to an unbelt, and
right. No, I was not. So I started working with Brian. He started teaching me pelt work before he got knighted. And then, so it was, I was doing pelt work for about a year and a half before I set foot on the fighting field. So I was probably working with him for about a year before he got knighted. But it was very clear early on, even at that point, that he was going to be knighted. And so, it wasn't really overstepping his bounds, by any means. But, yeah, I started working with him when he was a squire, and he got knighted in October. I became his squire in December. And then I set foot on the fighting field in the following February, which was, Estrella 1, 1985. And that was 40 years ago.
And so you also mentioned that before that you were page to someone, and then there's also a term that is man at arms, which is synonymous with armsman. So what's a squire versus a page versus a man at arms?
Okay, so a page for me was early on. It's usually for people that are younger that really aren't able to fight, and it's you're kind of a student to not necessarily a knight, but generally to any member of the populace, really. And it's just it's a good position for younger kids like I was, to kind of get a gist of what the SCA is about and have somebody that's teaching you how to do that. So I found the SCA when I was 12. My parents took me. It became a page, and then I was squire to Brian when I was 14. And then and again, me becoming a squire before setting foot on the fighting field, that's just the thing that's not done anymore. But I had effectively done the kind of work that I would expect of a man at arms in that period in between. So for me, a man at arms is you are in a student teacher relationship with a knight. The difference for me is that man at arms is the trial period. And so it's kind of like, you have to make sure that it's going to be a good fit for everybody. And, if for whatever reason, it's just not going to work out, then no harm, no foul. And I'll help you find the better teacher for you, the better relationship for your student teacher relationship. But it's kind of that trial period to where you're not really, the commitment is not as heavy. But once I take somebody as a squire, that is a lifelong commitment. And as I was saying about her relationship with Branos, that goes well beyond you getting knighted. But that is a commitment to you being knighted, and you accepting, us both accepting that we are in this partnership, to see you elevated to the chivalry. So that man at arms period is something that most of my squires have done that. There's only been a couple that I did not do that with, and that was because we had enough interaction previous to that I knew that they were a good fit with my household, and I'd been teaching them, in other aspects, and they just were a good fit.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the nice things about the man at arms, and so I'm pretty new at this. I have a man at arms, and I did have in my mercenary household, Anglesey, I had a sword brother, and our sword brothers are basically kind of like it's a sword brother kinsman relationship, and anyone that's been part of the foam fighting group on the East Coast, Daga here, it came out of that. It's one of the things they have, and it's very similar to a squire knight. It's just, I think Duke Havord had described the difference between a knight and a kinsman is you want to be King Arthur in the Round Table, or do you want to be Robin Hood? It's kind of like a little bit different, sort of a more Celtic tribal sort of twist to it. Anyway, but one of the things I would say is kind of nice about the man at arms is that I've seen it work not just in the trial period, but you can sort of give the man at arms some tasks to accomplish before they become a squire. And it kind of, if they accomplish that and they become a squire, it kind of makes becoming a squire sort of like their first level award. Like if maybe they're not going to get like a kingdom level award anytime soon, you can kind of do that. And then that gets them like their first level award. And then you work toward the next one as a squire. Maybe then the next thing is your grant level award, and then eventually knighting or something like that. So that's been kind of good. Sadb, would you like to give your perspective on finding a knight, to squire to?
Yeah, I can tell my story a little bit. So I am a little bit the other way around. I started fighting and was fighting for several years before reaching the point that I went, I would like to perhaps be serious and actually be good at this. So I was coming to practice. I was trying to get somewhat better, but I was not seriously contemplating knighthood for the first 2 years or so or anything like that. And then after deciding I would like to actually be good at this and getting a little bit serious, that's when I started having that whole question of, do I want to be a squire? Do I need to be a squire? Or do I have these wonderful teachers here that are teaching me things? And so as I alluded to before, the tipping point for me that made me go, yes, I think I would like to be a squire, was sort of that desire for more like personalized, tuned training, and having someone who had the obligation back to me to help me succeed and do things, as opposed to the sort of general obligation to the whole group of helping teach everyone a little bit here and there. But I wanted that more sort of personalized attention, as it were. And also just, I don't know, the opportunity to have that experience, because being around for lots of years, I was like 5 years in when I finally became a squire. I'm 10 years in now, so it's a significant chunk of my SCA career. I was not a squire, but it gave me lots of time to look around and see other people's, knight squire relationships and see how they worked and how very different some of them were. There, I was seeing some people who they hung out with their knight and like worked with them a little bit, but they weren't at the same fight practice, so they weren't even necessarily doing all the same stuff all the time. Some that trained very intensely and went everywhere and did everything with their knight, and some that a lot somewhere in between. And I really grappled very long and hard with the question of like, what is it that I actually do want? Because I actually had 2 people offer me a squire belt before I had even really, well, at least the first one, before I'd even really thought about it and had any idea I wanted to be a squire. Definitely didn't know what I wanted out of that relationship yet. So I sort of politely went, I don't know about that. I need to think about it. And sort of left it there. And fortunately, both of them were very gracious and were like, hey, if that's a thing you decide you want, come back, we'll talk. And there was not pressure put on me or anything weird. Like, nobody made it uncomfortable, which was really nice. It was very much an open-ended, like, if this is a thing you decide you're interested in, let's talk. If not, that's also cool. So.
Hey, can I interject real quick here? You said something about the like having someone dedicate their time to you, and I'm talking with somebody I know right now, and actually one of the inspirations of the show. There's within like 3 days of each other, I had 2 different people I know who were going through this, like, oh, we're looking for knights right now, and I was like, oh, this would be a really good idea for an episode we throw together. So this is kind of for them, but also for everyone. But one of my friends I talked to, I said, the nice thing about having a knight is I found for myself, when you don't have a knight, what I end up doing is I say, what do I need to work on? I really like want to throw this deep rap to win all my fights. And they go, you really shouldn't be focusing on those deep raps. You should be working on this other thing. Okay. Let me go ask another knight what they think about my deep raps. And like, I just keep shopping around until people give me the answer I want. And when you have a knight, somebody you trust, then it's kind of like, all right, they're saying I need to work on this. And I guess I can't just tell them to tell me that it's okay to work on what I want to work on. So.
And that's really that sort of, more personalized attention that I was talking about, was having someone that's watching me specifically day after day. And so as I sat down and had to sort of contemplate what is it that I would like out of this relationship if I'm going to do that with someone, and I will harp on people hard, like, figure out what you want first and then see if there is, a knight around that it fits into that. Don't just necessarily look at who's there and like try to go backwards. Like, think first about what you want. And for me, one of the very big things was like, I want someone that is, local, or at least somewhat local, that I'm going to be at practice with all the time, that we're going to events to, so that they can see me and what I am doing and can be hands-on with my training, because that's what I need. I need someone who can stand there and like physically go, no, move your hand over here. No, do it this way. And like, show me live. I need visuals, and just something I knew about myself and had definitely figured out in the fighting world was real important for me, from the learning I had done so far over the previous years. So like that was a big deal to me. And that unfortunately very immediately ruled out a whole bunch of very awesome knights that don't happen to live relatively close to me. So that depends on who you are and what you need. But yeah, one of the, in that vein was, I want someone who's going to be there and is watching me and seeing what I'm doing and can help guide me along my, you know, trajectory to improvement instead of the more scattered, well, what does that person say? And that person, and that person, and that person. But on that note, it doesn't mean I'm not learning from anyone else. I did still, like, I was not going to be okay with someone who says, no, you must listen to me and ignore everyone else and never learn from anyone else again. Instead, I wanted a knight who could help me distill and interpret the information that I'm getting from various sources and sort of funnel it through the, okay, here's what that means in the context of what we've been working on, and sort of shape all of that and filter out like, okay, that's decent advice, but like really not what you need right now, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I see some good nodding from Sean. You want to
Yeah, I mean, I'll say with Sadb in particular, you know, I had a chance to work with her while she was a squire, and without Branos present, and you know, I mean, Branos and I are very different fighters. You know, we have a lot of commonality, but we're very different. And you know, I understood that I can work with Sadb and, you know, give her some stuff that I think is going to fit well with what she's doing, within what Branos was trying to teach her. Right. You know, I mean, I'm not going to take the squire, one of the best trainers in our sport, and like completely upend everything they're doing and say, you got to change everything, because it's not how I do it. Right. So I'm trying to like fit what works for me. And it's something I think can work for her within the system that Branos is working with her. And I know, you know, I mean, when I get done working with her, like every time I said the same thing, now go home and talk to Branos about that and see what fits, you know? Because, you know, one of the things you find about all of the trainers that you have access to is none of us is completely right as an individual. We're all correct as a collective. But it's like some of the stuff I do. And, you know, I remember when Sadb was at my house and she blasted me with my own flat snap right in the face. And I said, yes, more of that. And that's a thing that, you know, it's a thing that I do that I was able to fit into their system. But yeah, it's always go back and talk to Branos about that and see if this is, you know, where he wants you to go with this.
And I did. I went home and was like, here's what he showed me and how we think it fits into what you're teaching me. And he went, yeah, pretty much. And then helped me sort of tweak the technique to refine it into what works.
And I think that's
guilt.
And that is the benefit of having that individual that you can go back to, because I mean, there's a cacophony of information, right? There's so much information that is out there and possible. And, you know, like you were saying, Barry, before you had a night, you get all these, you know, it's like, oh, do this and do this and do this and do this. And it's like, everybody's got very different ways of doing it, but it's you being able to have that person that you trust to come back to and say, I heard this, and where does this fit within what you want me to do? And you know, because sometimes the answer is just no. And sometimes the answer is not now. Right. It's like, yes, that is valid. And like, you'll get to that eventually and you'll fit that in there. But it's having that guide, to kind of say, you know, it's like, you know, whether or not it's valid information or whether that information is valid for you right now, or if it's just something that you're not ready for. You know, I mean, like you said, Barry, it's like, how many people did you have? I mean, how many different ways did you get to throw a rap? You know, get taught to throw a rap, and until you found the one person who was like, I think this will work for you.
Yeah. So go ahead, Sadb.
I have a sort of the opposite side. I just saw a comment that ties into this about, you know, commitment to a knight can also be reason to not apply advice from an overly helpful fighter. And that ties right in with this whole how to, using your night to distill information. It's also just, a handy excuse to throw at people that just won't leave you alone and be like, gee, that's nice. I'm gonna go talk to my knight about that, and you can kind of shut them up.
Well, it's funny you say that, because one of my friends, that was one of the requirements they're looking for that reason, because they're getting frustrated with people that are being overly helpful. Hey, Aggie, can you throw up the other question we had that you just had on the? Yeah, I like this one. So Nahama wrote this. So it seems to me there are three main needs. So one is trainer. One is sort of more of a social or an advocate. And number three is the buddy or the fun multiplier, sort of the cheerleader. And so I want to add my own personal story here. And actually, my knight is in the comment section right now. That would be William Vincente, Sir Bill. When I met him, he was Squire Bill. And then he got knighted. We were told that Sir Squire Bill was not funny and not to call him that. But we known him as Squire Bill for so long. And then his former Squire brother, Harold, who's Chris below, also in the comment section, they both got knighted the same Penzic. And these are two people that after I took a long break, I came back. They were sort of my mentors in probably all three of these ways. They helped teach me. They helped teach me how to fight. They were good social advocates of mine, and they were just good like friends and fun multipliers. But when I finally got around to popping the question, I had already had close to 30 years of experience. So that's not to say that there wasn't more for me to learn. I think maybe if I had lived like near Duke Sean or like right now, Duke Sven is giving me a lot of work on my two sword. Even though I'm a knight, we don't have like a formal squire. I'm not squire to Duke Sven, but like I am getting as much as I can out of him, and he has certainly given me a lot of help. So that might have been a path, but at the time that I decided to become a squire, essentially what happened was I'd been sort of working. I was part of a mercenary household, had been doing that for a long time. I had kind of already made my own path. I'd already had 30 years of experience in the SCA. I was coming up into my late 40s. I had, let's just say I had some leadership skills. Relatively, if I have a stat sheet, that was higher in my stat sheet than my single skills, as an example. And I was running practices. I was motivating a lot of people. And a lot of the Southern region knights who were active and who were a little bit younger were sort of kind of encouraging me. And I kind of got the feeling that they sort of felt that maybe I would be a good candidate for knighthood. And then I sort of had someone who was probably going to win that crown, was very blunt and said that he would basically was very interested in knighting me. And I had someone in a similar situation pulled me aside and said, I was in a situation like yours. And if you took a squire belt for somebody, that might really send a message to the kingdom about what your interest is. So what I was looking for mainly was not so much someone to teach me how to fight, but someone who would be a good advocate for me. So in that, I was looking for someone who believed in me, someone who actually thought that I had potential and that I was a good person. Someone who, this is a funny part, you might not think about this, but I wanted someone who everyone liked, because I knew that some people already had some opinions about myself just because I was part of a mercenary group. And we have a whole other episode about that. A lot of kingdom people don't like the mercenaries. So I didn't want to be held back because, my knight was an unpopular person. And Bill was certainly not an unpopular person. So those are the main things I was looking for. And we talked a little bit before we started the show. The whole part of advocacy is that you need somebody inside those Shiv Circle meetings that, I'll be honest, I don't know, Sadb, if you agree with me on this one, but I don't think you can know what goes on in those meetings until you're in those meetings. As an unbelt, you just have no idea what's going on. And then once you sort of see how the sausage is made, you're like, oh, right, now I see why it's important to have it's not necessarily the night doesn't necessarily have to speak for you, but there's just that sort of communication back and forth, and the biggest help for me, I don't know how much was done. I know my night did a great job of like pushing me in those meetings, but the biggest help for me was having the information coming back and being like, hey, these are the 3 things you need to work on. I think in my case, it was everyone knew I was a melee person. They wanted to see that I could do singles. And so I had to sort of shop that around, especially for me, I was a spear melee person, and spear is just, it's not even written in Corpora that spear is even considered for knighthood. So I had to sort of, do the singles. My knight pushed me to go out and fight people. He was like, trust me, just fight them. They'll like you. You'll be good enough, but just do it so they see you. Another question was, since I was a mercenary, is even do anything other than fight? So it was get out to the social events, get out to the non-fighting events, let them see you doing things rather than fighting. And the other one was stop making fun of people and talking so much crap on everyone.
Yeah, wait till you get knighted to do that.
Well, now I'm back to doing it.
And then talk.
Actually, I got to say real quick, I don't think he's on right now, but he's now our crown prince, Ryu. He was the one who knighted me, and he he noticed that there was about 1 year when I stopped busting his chops all the time, and then he knighted me, and I went right back to the old Bari.
Yeah.
I have no idea how much Bronis did or did not speak for me in the meeting, based on his general guidelines. I'm assuming little to none, but he probably did very subtly bring me lots of feedback without telling me that that's where it was coming from.
Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty much the same way with my squires. They're my take on it has always been, so I mean, my agreement with my squires is that the standard that I have for them being elevated is very simple, and that is that you will not be accepted into the order, you will be demanded into the order. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a unanimous polling, but I'm never going to have one of my squires who got knighted, just because we haven't knighted somebody in a while, and I guess this guy will do. I'm not the advocate that is. I'm not going to sell you to the order. I'm not going to convince the order that they should knight you. The order has to convince me that they want you among them. And so, I'm not the kind of knight that is going to push my guys in the circle. And something that Barry was talking about earlier, kind of the conduit of information. I want my squires to create their own renown, and I'm not going to bring them up in a circle. I want them to, get their own renown and be brought up in circle, by one of my brothers and sisters. But I'm not gonna push that. I'm not gonna bring them up, and so they have to go out there and create that for themselves. And and as the commentary comes back from the circle, I think the important information is not so much us telling the circle what our squires are doing, but more, as Barry mentioned earlier, getting the information from the circle to the candidate, to the squire, so they know what to work on. I think this is something that, and this is another conversation entirely, but I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding in the circles. Is like, I think there is information that needs to get to the person who's doing the work, the candidate or the squire, that may not otherwise get there if they don't have a knight squire relationship with somebody. And I'm not saying, you don't come out and say, well, so-and-so said this about you, so you need to fix this, and show him you fixed it. But the problems and the things that need to be addressed, I think that information needs to get out of the circle in ways that it had not for a long, long time. And so my job is to take that information and, like Sadb said, with Bronos, it's like, I'm not going to come out here and tell you that we just had a circle and these are the things you need to fix. What's that old story? It's like, you won't necessarily know that I've won the lottery, but there will be signs. Yeah, it's like I'm not going to come out and tell you that you were being talked about in the circle, but you'll know. And yeah, just just gently guiding those things and fixing those things. And
hey, Sean, you have one of my favorite quotes from you from maybe about a year ago was what was it? They know we're talking about them because they're not that dumb and we're not that subtle.
It's totally, yeah. We're not that subtle and they are not dumb. It's I was just talking to one of my squires recently about the idea of him being talked about. I'm like, of course you are. Like there's no way you can't know that. And they're not that dumb and we're not that subtle.
I'll say one of my unsubtle things I'll say to an unbelt that's getting talked about. I'll say, if you were a knight, who do you think the top 5 unbelts are in the kingdom right now? They're getting talked about.
Yeah.
I have them listed, and actually the ones that are about ready to get knighted, they list them accurately, which is a good sign. It's like, okay, they're aware of who are the knightly level unbelts, and
they should be listing themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have only done that a little bit so far, and I was largely doing it to be like, have I just completely lost touch with what the unbelts think because I now have the forbidden knowledge of being in the meeting, or is my opinion on who the top unbelts are still vaguely in tune with what other unbelts say? So I explicitly told them, not including yourself, you cannot list yourself. Who else do you think are the top unbelts in the kingdom? But I did want to sort of jump in on what Sean was saying about, I will not bring you up in the meeting. You have to earn your own renown. Bron has warned me very upfront that he is very much the same way. He's like, you might be picking the hard road here because I'm not going to advocate for you. You better get someone else to think you're cool enough to bring you up. But I also very explicitly had a talk with him about one of my expectations for him as my knight was to keep an eye on the conversation in the circle. And if people got overly excited and tried to pop me too soon, to shut that shit down. Because that is we don't like bringing this up in general, but it is sometimes a gender thing. And he had very much told me about watching it happen with Jocelyn, where back when she was still an unbelt, he had sort of seen her as she was hitting one of those big improvements at one point. People were getting really overly excited and trying to push her over the line right then. And he was like, no, she's not actually there yet. Chill out. Give it a minute. And took some more time. And then she, of course, did get knighted. And I was like, I absolutely do not want that to happen too soon. I would rather it take a little too long than the alternative, because at least for me, it was like, I never want to have to wonder if it was really real or not. So I was like, your job is to, because I picked a knight that I very much trust his opinion on whether I'm ready or not. It was like, if things are getting too hot and I'm not actually ready in your opinion, shut it down. And he promised he would do that for me. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. I have 2 women squires as well. One who now lives in Mid Realm, Duchess Vigdis, and I have my squire Agnes over in Drachenwald. And part of the conversations that we had early on, it was that very same conversation, especially regarding gender. Was it's like, and I mean, and one of the things that I've told them both, and I've had to tell other people, is I'm not hard on them because they're women. I'm hard on them because they're my squire, and that's what the nature of it is, And like she was talking about with Brano saying that it's like, you pick the hard road. I have specifically told all of my squires as their men at arms before they became a squire, you need to expect that I will be the hardest possible path to knighthood, and you are going to see other people who you consider to be lesser fighters or lesser knights, and you may be right, but again, with the standard that we have, it's like you will be demanded into the order, and And I just let them know right up front. It's like there are going to be people that are quite possibly lesser knights than you in every imaginable way that are going to get knighted before you, and their belt is not your belt. And in a weird way, that's part of my advocacy, right? Especially with Agnes and with Vigdis, it is, like Sai was saying, knowing that when they do finally get knighted, it is because they passed the highest possible standard, and they didn't get knighted just because they were, the next woman in line.
Yeah. Hey, I got I also want to add to that. So that's kind of, like you said, specific, little specific to a gender issue, although maybe it could be specific to other things, like maybe an age issue or someone that's sort of fits some other, let's say, minority demographic, for whatever reason.
Sure, it happens to other people too.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that could be sort of like a minority demographic that's a little outside of the scope. I mean, even for myself, I'll be honest, like I got knighted primarily as a melee specialist, and that's kind of driven me to work on my singles, because I didn't want people to say, oh yeah, he's the spear guy. I'm like, no, I want to be like the traditional, like I can do what people say. I don't want to, I can do what's traditional for the knights. I really want people to respect my singles tourney game as well, and I've been working on that. But if you get pushed too soon, it's something that I've sort of learned now that I've been a knight for a couple of years, is I've been telling people in their vigils that once you get knighted, there's a new bar that you didn't know existed, which is before you get knighted, you think you're a badass because you are better than 90 to 95% of the people you fight. Once you get knighted, 90% of them don't count anymore. In fact, if you lose to one of them, that hurts your ego, even though they just may be better than, they just haven't gotten knighted yet, right? And now you've gone from being in the upper 90% of what you think counts to being in the bottom 5% potentially. And if someone gets knighted too soon, then it can be frustrating, and then it demotivates you from going to practice, which then is this endless cycle that just starts to wear on you. So getting knighted too soon can backfire on you. We had a question on here. Do you have that question ready to bring up? It was about having a lack of. We have a plethora of We have a plethora.
New and up and coming fighters.
Yes. Antigone, do you know what a plethora is? Sorry, that is
a pinatas.
Yes, exactly. That's those who might be younger. That's a joke. It was a Three Amigos joke.
I'm with you, Barry.
What do you do when you don't seem to have a bunch of active local knights?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm too busy amusing myself.
I'm here for you, Barry.
I am my target audience.
On topic.
I don't have a great answer for this. I was hoping one of you two would have a great. I'm going to mute myself while I sit here and laugh.
I had already jumped in the comments with a short version of the answer, saying, in this scenario, whether it is your preferred thing or not, this is where going for the distance knight option might be the thing to do. If you find someone that you trust and work well with that lives further away, and you are willing to put in the time and energy to do videos and or traveling to them and back and forth a lot, that can be an option. Alternatively, if there's, among the local group, if you don't have a bunch of active knights, are there active unbelts that are further along and pretty good at what they're doing that can provide the training and the guidance for you? Become a man-at-arms to them and do that if you would like that sort of formalized relationship. Or there is also, again, the point Brannis jumped in with, you don't have to have a knight. But I feel like Antigone's question is sort of starting from a premise of someone who desires to have that relationship. So if you are actively seeking that, well, again, from my perspective as someone who very much preferred and needed that like close contact knight, it can be a lot harder to do the distance knight thing if that is not your MO, but it is still an option. Or again, if you've got those real good unbelts in your area, go ahead and do it that way. They can't go advocate for you in the circle. It misses that aspect of it, but it's still better than nothing if you really want to have that sort of mentor relationship.
Yeah, I think this also kind of goes back to the thing I was talking about earlier about, you can learn to fight from anybody, but when you're a squire to somebody, that's you saying I want to be that kind of knight. And proximity is definitely beneficial, especially if you as a student, need to have that proximity. But if you're in an area where you have, basically, and where Antigone is, the training that they're doing down there, to some extent, the fighting is going to kind of take care of itself. The training that they're doing down there in the Dallas Fort Worth area, Sven and Antigone and all those guys. The training they're doing is just phenomenal. And so I think the fighting to some extent is going to take care of itself. So then it's a matter of, who's going to teach me the peer-like qualities that I want to emulate. And yeah, that is something that you can look further afield. I know we have a remote group actually where His Highness Attilius lives out in Vernal, Utah. It's about 3 hours west or east of Salt Lake City. I had another one of my former squires that lived out there as well. And after he got knighted, he had basically told all the unbelts in the area that he wasn't going to squire any of them, because essentially you get me for free. Like, I'm here and I'm going to give you everything I have. But, when you want to find the person that you want to emulate as a knight, I'm going to send you off to be squired to somebody else, because one of the things you have when you're the only knight in a remote area like that, or a small area where there are like either, you're the only knight or the knights aren't showing up, as she was saying, there is this kind of tendency to kind of feel obligated to squire everybody in your shire, so that everybody feels like that they can be squired to somebody. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it, but like I said, if you've got a good fighting community and that part of it is going to be satisfied within your local group, I think you can look further afield to find that kind of knight that you want to emulate. And that kind of I think that gets into a bit of a topic that we were going to talk about anyway, and that's the long distance romance. And since I'm already talking about it,
continue.
Yeah. Oh, please continue the joke. Long distance. What is long distance, right? Is that an hour away? Is that 8 hours away? One of my
lives on another continent.
Yes, I happen to have one of those on another continent. And I will say that the power of the internet compels us. It is so much easier now to
real quick. That was a reference from the 70s. That was the Exorcist.
Yeah, the internet availability. Here we are doing a podcast, over the YouTubes and the Facebooks, and I was just talking to somebody, several kingdoms away the other night about their fighting. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Zoom, we have all of these tools available to us now. One of my first squires, Sir Tyrlock, who was on the Spear episode that Bari was on before Bari was knighted, talking about spear fighting. Tyrlock was the first of my squires to be knighted. And at the time I squired him, he was living in Billings, Montana, which is a 10-hour drive for us. And so early on, it was, me on the phone with him, telling him, well, okay, so you put your feet like this, and that one's a little bit further, and you stand like this, and you drop your hips like it. So I'm trying to tell him all this over a phone. And mind you, this is a phone that plugged into the wall. For those that remember back in the old timey days.
Wait. Did you even own the phone?
I did own the phone. Yeah,
Okay.
I did own the phone, but I was paying the phone company a lot of money.
Yeah, there's a time before you could own telephones.
Oh yeah, that's true. I did not. This was not a rental phone. I did own it. But yeah, I mean, I was talking to him on the phone and trying to explain it to him, over the phone because we were 10 hours away. 10 hours drive time. But you contrast that now with, like I said, I have my Squire Agnes over in Drachenwald, who during the pandemic we did Zoom calls pretty frequently to go over stick mechanics, and I could be on film demonstrating how these things work. So the tools that we have available to us now make it much easier to transmit that information and to make that much more feasible. When I was in the military, I decided I wasn't going to take any Squires while I was in because I didn't feel comfortable with the idea that I would get to one duty station and take a Squire, and then one of us would get transferred to another duty station, and then they're off, right? It was much more difficult to keep track of who was going where. And so, I just really wasn't comfortable taking any students like that because I didn't feel like I could commit to them in that regard. But now with everything we have available to us, I mean, yeah, I have a Squire half a continent away, who, like, I mean, it's a good fit for us. I'm super proud of everything that she's doing. It's really easy for me to track what she's doing, how she's doing. I can talk to the Knights in Drachenwald, like in an email or on a call. Like it's so much easier to do that. And so if you find somebody that you want to be squired to, and that is the kind of knight that you want to be, don't let the fact that they don't live in your hometown keep you from pursuing that relationship.
Yeah. Can I cut in here then? Let me actually. So I put together a list of things that you could be looking for. So we want to kind of bring this back to, how do you find a knight that's the right fit? So what Sean just described about, like, they don't need to be in your hometown, that would be the wrong fit for Sadb, because that's not what she wanted. She wanted something that was going to be someone who's there to train you. So I think I'm just going to go through this list real quick. Maybe I'll pause between each one, give everyone a little chance to digest it. And then Sadb and Sean, if you can just maybe take a mental note about something you want to sort of interject on. There's maybe about 15 items here, but this is a quick list. Actually, I'll be honest, I stole this list from one of the people I was talking about, who provided their list of things that they were looking for. And even had categorized all the knights in the area, or in probably in the whole kingdom, and just kind of had Sadb, you're laughing. So I want you to
it's a spreadsheet. They've got scores. It's a trade-off study.
You know what? I'm going to introduce the two of you because I'm serious.
My day job at this point. It's just all trade-off studies.
It's uncanny how Sadb knew that.
I already introduced this person to the other person I was talking about because they were so similar. And Sadb, I think you'd be a really good person to talk to. To
the list. Exactly.
Yes. By the way, my wife and I are very spreadsheety people too. So anyway, so here's some of the items came off that list. So will they be a good mentor for you? So that's going to be a big thing. Will they have the ability to train you? So here's some things to think about. So the ability to train you could be, are they a good teacher? Which may not be important. You may already have the local teacher, right? You may need something else that's filling a hole there. Are they a good teacher? Are they the right style? So there are some people that I thought about that I wasn't a big fan of because we were just very different body types. And I could tell they didn't understand that what they could do at 100 pounds bigger than me was not something that I could do. I didn't think that would be a good fit. Forms, ironically, one day I told my knight, Bill, I said, I realized what I'm good at, you're terrible at, and what you're good at, I'm terrible at. I mean, Bill is probably 8 inches shorter than me. He was a crown tourney heater, sword and shield singles fighter.
Oh, you cut out.
Oh no.
We have no host to make host face.
That's okay. I can
Why don't
totally.
you jump in on one of those if you got
Yeah.
something you want to cover?
I wanted to add some commentary to the like, are they able to train you part of that doesn't it does very much necessarily mean like are they able to teach, but some more specifics, some more granular detail you can get into. Like for me, I know myself as a student. I know that I can sometimes be like hard-headed and or stubborn and or just have a difficult time wrapping my head around things. So I didn't just need someone who is capable of teaching fighting. I needed someone who is capable of working with me and dealing with my quirks and like adapting the training to find and meet me where I'm at and figure that out, because not everyone can do that. Some people, they have this lovely wonderful script and they can teach you a thing, and then as soon as I start going, I don't understand how do I make it do this, they don't know another way to say it or another way to show it, or when I get frustrated and start getting a little bit stubborn and hard-headed as I tend to do, they would just get like ugh and angry and not want to deal with me. And so people who respond like that were not going to work for me. So that's another aspect of not just can they teach fighting, but can they specifically train you?
Yes. Hey guys, I'm back.
Barry.
I know. I had a total boomer moment. I'm not even a boomer. I'm Gen X. But as I was speaking, I hit the keyboard and it hit the like. I slammed on the keyboard and it hit me in the kick me out of the meeting button.
We
So anyway,
made along okay without you.
Here's what I would love your input on. This is something a lot of people don't consider, and we haven't talked about this yet. Are they part of a household, and will you be required to be part of that household? So, for example, one of the people in my area that was just on my list was a member of Blood Guard. And, I love it or hate it, Blood Guard is a very big household with a very specific culture. And, are you going to be part of that household or not? So I joined my knight's household, but his household is sort of it's not a Blood Guard. It's sort of more of a loose collection of family, and it's mainly connected through internet and a couple of parties and stuff like that versus Blood Guard, or I don't know what the other big households are around the rest of the kingdom. What do you two think about that in terms of like having to be brought into households?
Go ahead, Sadb.
That is an important aspect. I'm not sure if it's unique or weird, but sort of the way ours works is that the household that I am a part of, that Brunnis is also a part of, is not necessarily tied to your peer-dependent relationship. We have a bunch of people in the household who aren't fighters at all or aren't, dependents of somebody. I was a member of the household long before I squired to Brunnis. But at least for us, like they're independent things. You can be somebody's dependent that is in the household without joining the household and vice versa. So for me, that wasn't necessarily a thing, but it would have presented sort of a weird conflict if I had wanted to squire to someone else who was a member of a different household and they expect you to join their household, and suddenly like that would have been a thing. And that was something I had to think about at one point. And I literally was trying to figure out like how would I even manage that, because I already have these household expectations and then that and so yeah, very important factor.
Yeah, I'd like to have a man at arms right now who is already part of a household, and I'm part of two households. Anglesea's one of them, and I told him at some point, it's like, your joining Anglesea is going to be dependent on if you start hanging out with the people in the group, and the group decides that they would like you to join. And if you don't do that,
ours works.
Yeah, if you don't do that,
that's kind of the nature of Anglesea, though.
Yeah.
Right, because it's a mercenary house. It's not, it's similar to Legio in the fact that like it's not really a, it's almost, I mean, it's a collection of folks more than it is a top-down household sort of
Yes,
structure.
yes. It's very flat. I mean, we do have, it's exactly. Unlike, like I said, like a lot of, like, for example, if you join Blood Guard based on the year, but basically like you knew that Andreas, Ice Falcon was going to be the leader of that household. And then there were a couple nights in the household, and then that's how that was going to be. Yeah. And you were going to be part of that. And, there's some other households where, what's your regalia going to be? It's going to be these colors. That's what it is.
So multiple households or just joining a household doesn't necessarily present a conflict of interest. It's just an important thing to talk about so that you know what the expectations are and if that actually works or not.
Yeah. Or it might be like, well, hey, you're not required to join this household, but these, hey, I'm, whatever. I'm going to squire to Duke Sean. Don't have to join his household, but Duke Sean hangs out with these 4 other people all the time. Do you get along with those or don't you?
Yeah. Or, do you get along with your knight's, spouse, partner, etc.?
Yeah. That is a critical part of the relationship there.
If your knight or prospective knight has a spouse and
I won't take somebody as a squire I will not take somebody as a squire if my wife says no. That's just not happening.
Yeah, exactly. And and actually when I asked my knight, he had to reach out to his spouse, for the same thing, just to make sure. And I think, he probably had to fill her in on like what the personality type was or whatever, like what this is going to entail. But he was getting into his later SCA years in career, and it's like, it's going to be time. It's going to be time consuming. Like, how much time are you going to put into this? I mean, one of the first things we did, 2 or 3 weeks into our relationship, we drove 5 hours to Duke Edwards practice for me to go meet some Northerners. And then we drove 5 hours back, and I'm pretty sure I heard every single fight that Bill has ever had in a crown tourney during that drive.
Actually, when Vigus, my squire who lives in the mid-realm, when she asked me to be a squire, I said, well, yeah, we can definitely talk about that. I was like, I'll have to talk to my wife about it. And she said, oh, I already talked to her. It's fine. So she went and asked my wife before she even talked to me about it.
So anyway, I was going to say, hold on a second. I recommend. I'm not a good multitasker here. Anyway, what are we going to say here? Do they get along with other squires? That kind of talk relates to stuff we just talked about there. Here's a big one that we haven't touched yet. Will they still be relevant or available by the time you get elevated? I've seen this happen a couple of times. People that get squired to the person with the biggest reputation in the kingdom. They just finished their 4th or 5th reign as king. They're the highest on the order of precedence, like whatever. They get squired to them, and 2 or 3 years later, that person just disappears. And actually, I'll even give one example. I don't think he would get mad about this, but like I knew somebody that squired to Duke Darius, who's known as Omega, and I mean he had a really long SCA career where he was very involved, had a really giant house, and then at some point he just kind of
he moved.
He moved on to other things, wasn't as involved anymore, and that's something you have to consider. Like, is this somebody that's you have to kind of do that little, like, how long is it going to take for me to get knighted or elevated or whatever? And is this person going to do the things that I need to have done at that phase?
Yeah.
What else we have here? What's that?
All things to talk about.
Yes.
With anyone you're thinking about squiring to. Yes. Again, I'm going to, especially in the last 20 minutes here, start just drilling in the know thyself, figure out know who you are, what you need and what you want, and then talk to people. Find out what they need, what you need, and if those mesh. Back to the list.
Here's one I hate saying, because you would like to think that every knight is respected within the order. Some people carry more weight and other people don't. for whatever reason. So and I've actually seen some where maybe their nights don't help as much as they could, or maybe they do more harm they could, just be for whatever. Like, they could be nice people, they could be great fighters, they could be great teachers. They just have a way of I don't know, maybe adding the wrong spice to the pot when they speak. So, like I said, that was one of the factors when I talked to my knight, was I just want to make sure that it was I thought that he was somebody that was not going to do that. I thought he was somebody that was always going to add to the conversation, not detract from it. We talked about whether or not they're local, the importance of being local. Here's one. Are they already spread too thin, and can they focus on you? I was speaking to someone recently who felt like their knight, when they squired to them, put in a lot of focus into one person. It wasn't even really squired to them, was just sort of a local person, local to practice, who was someone that was a really big person that was coming up. They really put a lot of focus into them. And then once that person was gone, they kind of focused on the next person. They didn't really have enough energy just for this person. So that's certain the things one of my friends had mentioned. I was like, oh, what about this person? This person would be great for you. And they were like, they've already got 3 squires, and they're really busy with these 3 squires. I don't think they can handle a 4th, especially with their particular needs. Will they want to be your knight? That's obviously a big one. As much as someone might be the perfect person for you, they may not be interested in taking you on.
Let me go back to that last one for just a second. I think
Sure.
I think a lot of that is the capacity that somebody has. I know when I first started looking at taking squires, I'd seen those people that were spread too thin. I'd seen the people that just collected as many squires as they could so they could have a cheering section at Crown. I'd seen some of the stuff I didn't want to do. And so when I first, came into it, I was like, I will have 3 students and no more, no less. No more than 3 students. And I had this hard and fast rule that I arbitrarily created for myself. And I'd had those 3 students, and then Tierlock showed up. And that's when I realized that this rule of 3 that I'd created for myself entirely was complete bullshit. And speaking of the relationship that this is, I developed a relationship with Tierlock, and I realized that if he'd been squired to somebody else, simply because I decided I wasn't going to have more than 3, I would have been heartbroken. And so that rule went out the window, pretty early, because I had the capacity to do that, with working with Agnes over in Drachenwald. I happen to work grave shifts for my job, which is a good time to be chatting with her in the middle of her day. So we, while I'm at work all night long, we talk all the time. And she needs that kind of regular communication to talk about some stuff. And I happen to have a job that allows for that. And I have the capacity to do that. Because I have 4 active squires right now that I think are all pretty well active. And I feel like I give them each the time that they need. And some need more and some need less. And so it just, you just have to look at their capacity. And again, as I was saying, have that conversation, communicate with that. It's like, I see you got a bunch of other squires. Are you going to have the time that I need for you to do that? Do you have the capacity to provide me what I need? Because if you have some low maintenance squires that are going to kind of go off on their own and do some of the work on their own, that doesn't require as much capacity. So I think that you just, again, there's no hard and fast rules about any of this, right? But if you have that conversation and you agree that knight has the capacity to work with you, then that's something you can work with.
So to finish this up, hold on a second. Hold on. Sorry, I'm showing all the behind seats there. Hold on to that. We're almost there. Sorry. We have a little comments thing that goes on. What's up, Sadb?
I had something I really wanted to jump in with, but
Go ahead.
Okay. As we're getting short on time, I'm realizing a point that I really want to make that we haven't necessarily spent a lot of time on. We've spent a lot of time focusing on you as the student, as the squire, what it is that you're looking for and your needs and etc. The other side of the coin, once you know thyself and you start talking to people, is what does that knight expect of you? And does that work for you? Are you okay with that?
That was the next point. Can you meet their expectations? Are they too high or too low?
Because if this particular knight that you're talking to can totally like teach and train you and be your advocate and do all of those things that you need, but they expect from you like X number of practices and this, that, and the other, and you need to pack their bag and carry all of their stuff and set up their camp at Penzik and do all these things, and you're like, that is too much for me. I can't commit to that. Maybe that one isn't actually right for you. Or conversely, if they're like, man, I don't really like need you to do a whole lot. We're gonna hang out and be buddies, and you in fact were like, I would actually like to carry some of your stuff around or whatever it is. Like, you can have that conversation. But I have met other squires who are like morally, it's probably the wrong word, but like they're strongly opposed for their own very personal reasons. Like they absolutely, I will not be your tote and carry squire. I will not pack your bag and carry your stuff around and pack your car for you. I'm happy to provide service, to learn the service aspect of things in some other way, but like I will not do that. And you need to talk about that up front, because if that's what the knight expects and they're not willing to compromise on that with you, then like that's not going to work. So make sure you understand what it is that they want from you, because Knight Squire is a two-way street. We have focused really hard on one direction of it, but it is two ways. So
yeah. And that's along those lines. I mean, the two things that I require of my squires are, there's service. But I mean, I'm fairly low maintenance. I can put on my armor all by myself. I could take it to the car, but I know as a squire, it's like, I wanted to do that service for my knight. There were things that I did because I just wanted to do that. Right. And I remember Brian being asked one time, it was like, man, you got him doing that for you? And I was like, no, he just does it. Because he wants to do that. Brian wasn't really demanding of me, like I said, you're going to help me set up my camp. You're going to do all this other stuff. It's like, many hands make light work and all, but like, yeah, you're not a servant the way that perhaps squires were in period, right? That's just not a practical expectation, I think, for what we do. But there is a certain amount of service, and I think a squire should want to, pack up their knight's armor and, take it to the car. Like, you should want to, but I, as the knight, like that's not the, it's like, that'd be cool, but that is not an absolute, diehard, expectation of what you're doing.
And that was just an example I threw out there, but
yeah,
every knight does have some sort of expectations. Like, I have talked to squires and or knights who, like, their knight required, you must attend X number of events a year, or you must go to X number of practices like per quarter or something like that. And it was very attainable numbers, just trying to keep the squire honest and keep them active.
Yeah.
But again, you have to know yourself. And if you're looking at that and going, I'm not sure if I can actually commit to that. Okay. Or if the knight says, okay, I expect you to come and fight with, my household at Penzik, and you, for whatever reason, have some other commitment, like, just things you need to know, understand what the expectations are.
Yeah, I'm saying for myself, I'm a very independent person, so I feel very uncomfortable with people doing things for me. It's just the way I am. But on like the expectations, like, in a nutshell, like I've seen a lot of people. Like, one of my gripes are people that really talk the talk and they don't walk the walk. And even just for a local practice, I keep a spreadsheet of attendance for those who want to participate in this. Is if you want to participate in this, and I try to drive them. But people say like, oh, I'm not getting any better. Let's look at the spreadsheet. You've practiced, 17 times this year. The Duke Sean rule is 50 to 52 times. That's really where the bar is. You see the ones that are getting better. And that's me. It's like, kind of like, if I'm going to put my time and energy into it, I want to make sure that you're putting your time and energy into it too. within some reasonable sort of expectation. A last point I want to put in here, something we haven't talked about. Here's one. Are they a good fit in other ways? That could be religious, drug use, politics. Is this, and let's say, for example, the drug use, and that could go either way. Do you enjoy, smoking weed and your knight enjoys smoking weed? That might be a good fit. But if one of you does and the other one doesn't, that might be a bad fit. It might be like, hey man, you're too busy. You didn't make it to three of the fights at Penzic because you woke up late because you're partying too late at night. That's not what I do, or vice versa. Man, why can't you have some fun, man? Quit being such a square.
Yeah. There's definitely like personality clashes or values clashes or values jiving that are important. But right.
Yeah, I think as far as expectations, the other the real expectation that I have is trust. Because ultimately, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit here and there, but basically when I tell you that you're going to change weapons forms, I need you to trust that I'm doing this for your benefit, right? I've always told my squires, like, I'm never going to ask you to do something simply for my amusement, right? Now, I may be amused at some of the things I ask you to do, but that's not why I'm doing it, right? Like when and I mean, all my fighters at some point had hit a plateau, and I remember telling Timmer, I was like, "You're going to fight left-handed for the next 6 months," and the answer I expect to get out of them is yes, sir. And because they know I'm not doing it just to make them miserable. I'm not doing it to humor myself. I'm doing this because this is a change that they need to make. And they have to trust that when I'm asking them to do these things and to make these changes, that I'm doing this because it is in the best interest of their path to knighthood. And if you don't, and if you don't have that trust, if you're going to, and I'm pretty, that is something I'm very strict about, because I know what I'm doing. I know how to teach people how to fight. And when I find that person that's going to be like, well, this is really working for me, so I'm just going to stick with this. I'm like, well, it turns out that's not really working for you, and that's why I'm telling you to knock that shit off, right? That's like, and I need you to trust me that we're gonna get through this, and that I know what I'm doing. And because if I get a bunch of yeah buts out of somebody, if I get somebody saying I'm just gonna go on my own, I'm like, then you do not need me as a knight. You probably don't need a knight at all, but damn sure not me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. And again, here I am. I'm a knight. I'm happy that I'm doing tourneys. I want to get better, but I'm pretty middle range right now for a knight. Which again, if you've not been knighted before, it's not like Duke, Sean, and I are not the same. I will spear the shit out of that guy. No, I'm kidding. No, he definitely has.
I will give it a good shot.
Yeah, he definitely has the tournament accolades. Like I still have a lot of room to grow. And like I said, Duke Sven has been spending a lot of his time helping me, and he gives me some things I need to work on. He's kind of said the same things now a couple months in a row. And I'm at this point where I'm like, I better fix these things or he's going to stop helping me, and that's kind of, you have to understand it from the perspective of a squire, that if your knight keeps giving you advice and you keep not listening, what are they getting? Like, honestly, they're not getting paid out of this. So at the end of the day, like their payment is your success,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's why they're doing it. And again, and if that's not for you, like maybe you need someone, like you said, there are some knights that are better buddies, or they're better cheerleaders, or they're better mentors, they're better at getting you connected with different people.
Yeah. If you're doing pretty good with fighting, or if you have a whole bunch of people that can teach you how to fight, and what you actually need a knight for is to refine all your PLQs, then maybe that works, Yeah.
I got a quick story, and my knight will remember this one. We finished 100 Minutes War, which is one of the big events in the East Kingdom. We went out to dinner later, and we were sitting. It was Sir William, my knight, and we were sitting with Sir Donnan. And Donnan was just grilling me. Donnan's a great guy, good friend of mine, super nice guy, but he's grilling me on all these things that he thinks a squire should know. And it was a lot of very, very traditional. Why is your belt red? Why are you supposed to have a ring that is of a tarnishable metal? Like all this stuff. And I didn't have answers to anything. And he would just make these like, could not believe that I didn't know the answer to these things because it was so important for the culture of, what he grew up in. And I remember as we left, I think Bill and I were in the car together, and he said, "You got to remember, his night was a Marine, my night was a hippie." So just two completely different, backgrounds are coming from. And so again, that's something in terms of the fit. Like, do you like that? Do you want to be part of the tradition? Do you want to be part of the story? Do you want to learn about the Knights Templar and why they do all this stuff? Or are you kind of more focused on the fighting aspect of it, or the teaching, or some other things? And you've got to figure that stuff out. So, and then the way to figure this all out, Sadb, spreadsheet, write them all down.
I did not go quite that far when I was in this situation. I sat and wrote out the list of it took me a while. Looking back, it was kind of hilariously obvious who the choice was going to end up being, but
early on, too, right?
It wasn't as obvious, and I had spent a lot of time figuring out and writing down what do I actually want out of this. I did not go so far as making a trade-off study. But
hey, Sean, you want to talk about the stigma of giving back your belt?
Yeah, that was one of those things I wanted to cover. And there's this is something that we see a lot of in the Knight Squire relationship is, when, sometimes that relationship goes south for a variety of reasons. My fault, your fault, nobody's fault, right? And there is, I think, a great misunderstanding amongst the unbelted community that there's a stigma associated with transferring, that fealty, or transferring that Knight Squire relationship. And I think it ends up, you'll have a squire who ends up in a really bad relationship because they're afraid that if they sever that relationship with that knight, that they'll be blackballed, or that like you said, there's this stigma attached to it that it's like, oh, we got to watch out for that guy because he couldn't keep his commitment with the knight. But really, it's like any other bad relationship. If this is just a bad relationship for you to be in, then you don't need to stay in that relationship just for, just because you exchange those oaths, right? If it's a bad relationship, it's a bad relationship, and you need to find the person who is going to guide you better. But I think there's a great misunderstanding, and I've seen a lot of unbelted fighters who were in that situation, and they were going to stick it out because they were afraid of how the knights would see them, and it's I don't know entirely where it comes from. Obviously it's, there's some history there. It's happened, right? But it's one of those things that I think, people need to have a better understanding of, it's okay. Right. I have at least two of my squires who had been squired to other knights previously. And those relationships ended for whatever reasons they did. And those squires have been phenomenal squires to me and for me. And I think, we talked about this before the show, there's a difference between ending a bad relationship and shopping around for the best knight. So I think if you get a squire that's gone through 4 or 5 different knights, trying to find the person that's maybe going to just get them knighted or whatever, that becomes a little more obvious, I think. But I think that's on much more case by case basis. But I think by and large, if you're in a relationship and it's not working for you, don't worry about what the chivalry is going to think about you severing that relationship.
And then the last question here, who should do the asking? I don't think we covered that. Did we cover that? I think we covered that.
It depends.
Yes, it depends. So I'll say so. And actually, I almost asked our order. I was curious about that. If there was a who should do the asking. My I feel like I don't know if Bill or Harold, if you want to write that, or Sterling, if you guys want to write that in the comments. I don't know if there's a strong opinion about that in the East Kingdom. I think typically it's expected the squire would ask, and I think that's, but it doesn't have to be. But there's a little bit of a stigma of, if a knight's just going around trying to build a household and just trying to grab all the people before they're smart. Yeah. So Harold just wrote the squire should ask. But then Sterling wrote his knight told him. So I guess it all depends. So
Yeah, what I learned from talking to people and hearing from people is that maybe other kingdoms have a more, kingdom-wide culture perhaps, but at least here in the mid-realm, like it varies person to person. Some knights don't really care either way. They'll come to you if they really think, you'd be a good squire, or they're perfectly happy to be asked. Some knights apparently have very strong opinions one way or the other. And so it's kind of intimidating as an unbelt being like, but am I going to screw it up by asking them when it's one of the people that like thinks they should ask you, and you have to do this awkward, like middle school, well, I'm going to go ask this other person to ask them to find out what method they prefer so I don't screw it up, and like, will you tell so-and-so to tell so-and-so that I like them, kind of a thing, which it sounds real silly, but sometimes that's just how it works, and you don't have to make it as awkward as it just sounded. It is as simple as just sort of asking around, being like, hey, does such and such knight care who asks who? Does it matter? And like someone will know.
yeah.
But
well, so not exactly on that topic, but one of the things I did before I asked my knight if he would be my knight. By the way, the people I gave advice to is when you get around to asking, don't hint. Like, when I had a conversation with my knight, it was like we get 30 minutes in the phone call. I asked him if he wanted to be my knight. He was like, "Whoa, that's not where I thought this was going." Because I've been 30 years without a knight. So why would I want a knight now? But with that, before I talked to him, I talked to another local knight who I respected a lot and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of asking this person to squire to. What do you think about that?" Just to make sure, like, you might be like, "Oh, that's a terrible idea because no one listens to him," or he's whatever, like for whatever reason, or there's this political thing you're not aware of, and that person would never have one of his squires be knighted, or whatever it is, or watch out, that person's got some shady stuff going on. Not that Bill would have shady stuff going on, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned earlier, one of the things kind of on the list of things to think about was, is this person not someone that the order is actually going to listen to or respect or whatever? And you don't actually have a good way of knowing that if you're an unbelt. So that's the talking to other people is, how you can perhaps find out, like, actually this person in the ship circle is a giant douchebag and everybody hates them. And you might not know that otherwise, like whatever it might be.
Yeah, I usually have prospective squires talk to my former squires. Like,
that's a good idea.
You're gonna want to know what you're getting into. You're gonna want to talk to the people who have survived this.
Yeah. Hey, we got a question here from Thorin, who's one of our baby knights in the East Kingdom, and he said, "What would you say?" Where did it go? Everything's jumping around. Hold on. What would you say to? All right, no one comment.
There you go. He's got it for you.
Thank you. What kind of timeline would you expect for them to have to waiting? It's funny because that was actually brought up to a handful of people in my vigil. A handful of people brought that up to me, which is like, don't take squires right away. Put a lot of thought into it. Because I think in some case, now if you have like a handful of man-at-arms, that might be an easy decision. But some people might be like, "Oh, I'm a knight now. What's next? Grab a bunch of squires." Kind of like Sean said, "Oh, I grabbed some squires early on, and then I learned that maybe I should, have a different sort of expectation for what a squire is."
Yeah.
Like I am 6 months into being a knight, not really feeling ready to take on a squire at this particular moment, and fortunately don't have anybody coming and asking yet. But to contrast that, my squire brother, who got knighted a little bit before me, he had already had a man-at-arms who had been like training with him for years and then had become his man-at-arms. And so pretty much the moment he got knighted, they went ahead and formalized that and turned him into a squire. But that made sense because they already had the relationship. Like, I don't already have that kind of training or mentor relationship going on with anybody, so I need time.
Yeah, I've heard the idea that you wait a year. I think that's just really an arbitrary timeline. I mean, I think, as with all other relationships, if it's good fit, it's good fit. You know, like I said, I squired Brian 3 months after he had been knighted, and that was just because that was the next local event that we could really do it at. But I'd been working with him for, you know, a couple of years before that, so I mean, I knew that's the guy was going to be. I knew he was going to get knighted, and when he did, I was going to be squired to him. But for me, after I got knighted and went in the military, and I just didn't take any squires the whole time that I was in the military because I just didn't feel like I could commit to that. And so there, you know, it took me, I mean, I guess 6-7 years before I actually took a squire. And so, yeah, I don't think there's not a hard and fast timeline. And if you, I think it comes down to that relationship, right? When you acknowledge that you have basically that working relationship already, at some point you just acknowledge that's there.
Yeah, I think the wait a year is a decent like rule of thumb to throw at people to prevent people from doing the, oh, I'm a knight now, I have to take squires.
Yeah.
And it like gives you it in the absence of, you know, I already have this relationship with someone and like we know, it gives you that guideline to say, take a minute, breathe, figure out what being a knight is like. And by about a year in, I suspect most of us have figured out by then that we should or shouldn't be taking squires yet. And you can take it from there. But I feel like that 1 year rule of thumb is sort of the good buffer to prevent the, oh God, I'm required to take squires.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah. Hey, so we're at 9:37. I would call that an SCA 9:30. So let's try to wrap this up. So one thing I just want to add here, and I'd like to get some final comments from Sadb and Sean. But one thing I want to add here is, man, the comment section was awesome tonight.
Yeah,
and as much, yeah, we have we have a host and 2 guests, but really I think we've all hosted before. We're all regulars here. And so it's not a really big panel, but my God, I appreciate everybody that tuned in to listen to this, but also keep in mind that part of the community that we have here is all the involvements in the comment section. So I see, like, right off the bat, you know, Thorne had asked the question. I see people in the comment section giving their own answers already. So I think that's fantastic. Yeah. So let's have some final thoughts here. Sir Sadb plus 7 months. And by the way, if you're not sure if Sadb is ready to be a knight, watch her crown attorney videos. They're on YouTube. I think you looked really awesome.
Well, thank you.
I'll have to take a look.
My final thoughts are, I'm just going to take the opportunity to reiterate, know thyself. And if you don't yet know thyself, stop and think and figure it out before you start digging into, you know, what about this, that, and the other knight? Like, figure out what you need and want independently. Then start comparing that to who you know and etc. And then part 2 is talk to your prospective knights, talk to your friends about their knights and their knight squire relationships to figure out what it is that you think you want if you don't know. So much communication is required and is important if you really want things to work well. So know thyself and then communicate a lot, like any other relationship.
And then your Grace?
I think I'm going to pick up right where she left off. I think it is critically important to understand that this is a relationship. And you know, I know for me and my squires, and my relationship with Brian, this relationship is long past when you get knighted. We don't just cut you loose, and in a lot of ways that's really just the beginning. And I know my relationship with my former squires is so much stronger with them as my peers, and we've continued to grow together. But it's a big decision. It's something you should definitely take your time to make sure it is the right fit and that it is going to be a good relationship for you. Um, and think about it. Don't rush into it. Don't and especially don't feel like you have to accept a belt from somebody who threw a belt at you just because they're a knight. And I think that's something that super new fighters just really don't understand. They're like, oh, somebody gave me a belt, so I guess I'm his squire now. You don't have to. That's not how it has to work. And to the knights out there, don't do that. That's not nice. Don't do it. But it's a relationship, and my relationship with my knight and with my squires is something sacred and absolutely cherished. I am a better person for my experiences with Brian and with each of my squires, and in a lot of cases my grand squires as well.
All right, awesome. With that, I think that concludes this episode of Coach's Corner. Wait, what do we have here? Comment and suggestion form.
Got the suggestion box.
Very nice. That's right. That's right. So that concludes this episode of the Coach's Corner Roundtable discussion, finding a knight that's right for you. Cue the music.
Everybody have a good night.
Good night, everybody.